to iFanboy. I am Josh.
I'm Ron, and we're here in Los Angeles.
I'm Stan.
You're going to get your turn. Okay, all right.
We're here in Los Angeles, and we're in the office of Mr. Stan Lee. Thank you very much for hosting us.
A pleasure.
And, of course, we had to invite our good friend Jeff Canada from the Totally Rad Show.
Hi, how you doing?
And so we've been talking about doing a show with you, Stan, and you were gracious enough
Threatening
to us
is
coming
the word.
Well,
Threatening.
You were calling a lot and bugging us to get on the show, and
Begging.
after a while, we couldn't really deny it much longer. So, fine.
here
I
we
can
are.
see how this is going to go.
But so we also wanted to involve you, the audience. So a couple of days ago on iFanboy.com, we posted up saying we're going to be talking to Stan. What do you want to know? So this is your opportunity, your questions. We received so many questions from our audience. We had to whittle them down to what we thought was kind of the best 10 or 11.
You had to whittle the 20 down to
No,
10
they were.
11, right?
It was overwhelming. The
Really?
response. Yeah, it was great. So
Do you know that the word whelm means the same as overwhelm? If ever you want to save time, you could say it was whelming. Just a little bit of information.
But then you've got to explain it, and you lose the benefit of that time saving. He's going to kick me out.
Do we need him on this?
I think my function is going to be to sit here dumbly and smile and be in awe.
I think that's all I'm doing.
All right, well, let's dive into the first question. Big Yanks, who's from New York City, actually, is a big fan of your work. He wants to know, what's the one character that you've created that surprised you when it became popular?
It surprised me
Yeah,
when
like-
it became... Well, they all surprised me when they became popular. I mean, whoever expected, that one day I'd be interviewed by such sterling stars of the media, and all of that on kind of these ridiculous little characters. But maybe the Hulk. Maybe it was really surprising that this big green monster would suddenly be the subject of multi-million-dollar movies and all of that, and I'm still surprised.
Right.
But I'm happy. I don't want anybody to think that it's bothering me in any way.
Yeah, no, but when you and Jack or Steve or whatever were creating the look of a character, were you certain that you say, oh, the kids are going to love this, or was it like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work?
I'm going to tell you a secret.
Okay.
The only thing I ever worried about was, is it all right if I look at them too?
Sure, yeah, please
or
do.
should I
Yeah,
just
no,
direct it?
please.
Really?
Yeah, no, it's,
We're all, and you're going to just sit there and smile.
Yeah, you can look at me and I'll smile back. I'm doing well.
The only thing I really cared about when I was in the process of creation was, do I like it? Because I always figured, and this is a terrible thing to say, I shouldn't say this, but I'm not that unusual. And I figure if I like something, there'll be millions of other people who like it too. I don't think my taste is that different from everybody else's. And I think one problem that so many writers have, or entertainers of any way, they try to think, what will they like? What will the audience like? Well, you can't put yourself in somebody else's head, but you know what you would like. So that's all I did. I said, I would like a big monster who's really a good guy. Now go ahead, Jack, draw him.
Now, so conversely, was there ever one that you did that you really, really liked, that you thought, this is great, and then it didn't catch on so much?
Well, I've been pretty lucky. Just about all of them caught on. But
You do have a good rate.
Yeah.
But there was one that never quite made it, and that was Giant Man. We had Ant-Man, and he did okay. And then I figured, well, we have Ant-Man. Why not do Giant Man? Get twice as much income. Yeah. And Giant Man never really became Marvel's most popular character.
Right.
Although he was okay, I don't ever want to put anything down. I mean, someday there may be a Giant Man movie where they run out of all the others.
They're doing Ant-Man, so...
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, Ant-Man's
Who
a
knew?
big.
Yeah.
He's going to be a biggie.
Yeah.
In fact, I had lunch with the fellow who's going to direct it. A real nice, young, enthusiastic guy, and he's all excited about it and everything. And despite anything I could tell him, he's still going ahead.
Pitch him on the Giant Man movie next.
Yeah.
You wait and see.
Yeah.
All right, so our next question comes from Paul, who wants.
I mean, there are more.
There are more, I know. He said a lot of us grew up raising hell pretending to be Hulk and the Spider-Man. Read these characters we grew up.
They pretended to be the
when they're
Hulk
kids
and
and things like
Spider-Man?
that. Who were your heroes as a kid, and how did they influence you as a comic creator?
Well, I don't know what really influenced me, but my heroes when I was a kid were Robin Hood and D'Artagnan of the Three Musketeers and guys like that, Sherlock Holmes, anything Jules Verne wrote. They didn't have Captain America then. They didn't have Spider-Man or Superman. So I was one of the unfortunates who had to read books. And
But did you live in that fantasy
Pardon
world?
me?
Did you live in that fantasy world as a kid? Were you into fantasy and
yeah, I loved things
escapism?
that were bigger than life, you know, and very imaginative. But I loved everything. I mean, I read the Hardy Boys. I don't know if you know about the Hardy Boys.
Sure. Yes, yeah.
And there was Don Sturdy and Tom Swift and Bomba the Jungle Boy. Did I mention Tarzan? I love Tarzan. Anything Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote, the Martian stories. Anything that was, say, bigger than life and imaginative, Moby Dick, things like that.
I think that stuff did influence you a little. I mean, it does. That sounds to me like what you did was an illogical extension of those kind of things. Like those are the people writing adventure stories.
I
for
guess
kids.
in a way,
You
yeah.
know, same.
To me, if you read the same old stuff, well, you know, but I like a story that, oh, wow, this is something, this is a thought, a concept, an image that I hadn't thought of before or seen before. That's when it really becomes fun.
And isn't there
I'm
something?
going to get a stiff neck doing this. You know that, don't you? Why couldn't you all sit on one side?
We got you surrounded. But also, isn't there something to the idea of your love for words? It seems to me as a reader of your stuff that you really savor words.
You're
and
right. Well,
Develops that.
I figure if a writer doesn't like words, it's a tip-off he might be in the wrong business. You know? 'Cause what else do you use? See, you have to be good with words. That should be a no-brainer, you know.
Yeah.
And Josh, we were talking earlier about influences and stuff like that as far as
You
comics.
know, what's funny is that I've heard people ask you a lot of questions about things like, you know, Spider-Man and stuff like that. One of the books that you worked on that was actually hugely influential to me, and I think a lot of other people, was How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Yes.
Everybody I know read that book, and even if they didn't necessarily grow up to be an artist, you know,
If they didn't, I failed.
I guess, but what it
Well,
did was-
talent
you should have
failed.
seen my attempts. They weren't very good.
there were pages where, you know, this is what a character looks like on a really cool page, a really good composition, and this is a neat page layout. And I find that must have been hugely influential. Do people mention that to you a lot?
Not as often as, or as enthusiastically as you just did, but when I do book signings, very often a number of people will have that book and ask me to sign it, and they'll say, we loved it, you know. And I say to them, so what company are you working for now, drawing strips? Well, we're not, but we love the book.
Well,
But I must mention one thing. John Buscema, who did the artwork,
Yes.
he was so responsible for most of the things in the book. I mean, I said to him, let's do a book about how to draw comics, John. And I gave him a rough outline. I said, you know, we have to show how to draw faces, figures, costumes, action, that kind of thing. And that was all. He did everything else. I mean, all the thought and the work was what he put into it. And he brought me all the pages, all illustrated, and all I had to do was put in the words,
Right.
which was kind of simple.
The
So-
Marvel process. Right?
Yeah.
But for me, that was very helpful in
I'm
sort
glad
of
to hear
learning
that.
how to appreciate a comic book page. And you
For
know,
me too. You know,
Yeah.
I learned a lot looking at John's.
look, that's a big, nice Steve Rogers, and this is a little scrawny wimp. I get the difference now.
Well, that leads to our next question, which a lot of people talk about the Marvel process and how you guys created comics and stuff like that. And Flapjack's username, he wrote in wanting to know what your creative process was like with Jack Kirby as opposed to Steve Ditko. Like, did it change working with the individual artists?
Well, I wouldn't say as opposed to, because as far as I can remember, we worked pretty much the same, Steve and I and Jack and I. And the process was this. When originally I came up with the idea for the thing, you know, for Doctor Strange, for the Hulk, for the FF, whatever. And I would say, let's say to Jack, I have this idea for somebody. I want him to be a monster, but he's a lovable monster, you know, the Hulk. And I told him, I said, I want him to become the Hulk because there's a gamma ray experimentation. There's a bomb going off, and he'll save a kid's life. And you know the story. I won't repeat it now. But I just gave him in broad strokes what I wanted for the origin. And then Jack, I didn't write a script. And then Jack took what I told him, and he drew a story. He, in essence, fashioned the story himself. And he was wonderful at it, and so was Steve. Then I would get the pages, and I just put in the copy, adding whatever I could to try to make it interesting and make it make sense. And I worked exactly the same way with Steve. Said, I want to do a character called Spider-Man. Actually, I gave it to Jack first. And I didn't like the way, I said to Jack, don't make him look like Captain America. I want this to be an ordinary, average, skinny little kid. But Jack was so into these superheroes that when he brought me the first couple of pages of Spider-Man, he looked like Thor. So I said, okay, Jack, forget it. I'll give it to someone else. Jack didn't care. He was busy doing all the other strips.
Where are those pages?
Yeah, right.
You know, do you think I had brains enough to save them? And then I gave it to Steve, and I told him what I wanted, and Steve was perfect for the job, just perfect. And after a while, Steve was practically doing most of the plots, you know, because he caught on so quickly, and the same with Jack. I didn't have time to plot every story. My biggest contribution was after they drew it, after we discussed it a little bit in the beginning, I would try to take their pictures and put the dialogue in such a way that it looked like it had been carefully planned and we had discussed this for months and have it all tie together. And it was fun working that way because, in a sense, it was the best of what Steve could do and what Jack could do. Because they were real storytellers, but they told their stories with pictures.
Right.
And I loved the way they would tell the story, and then I would put in the words,
Well,
take all the credit.
Well, that leads to our next question, which somebody was asking about how, you know, based on Jack Kirby's work after he left Marvel and some of the later stuff he did, and some of the later issues of Fantastic Four got a little more cosmic. So Cormano wrote in asking, was, you know, Jack's influence on Fantastic Four in those cosmic stories, did that come from him? Whereas on Spider-Man, it stayed kind of street level, and when you're working with John Romita, was that more of you keeping it kind of the everyday life, you know, kind of?
Well, what happened was, with Fantastic Four, we were always trying to top ourselves. Yeah. And whether Jack left or not, it would have been the same. We would have been getting more and more cosmic, because we knew the readers were always looking, what's the next big thing they're going to come up with? Yeah. With Spider-Man, it was a different type of strip. He was this guy who lived in Forest Hills, and he had the aunt to worry about and so forth, and little romantic situations. And all I had to do was dream up good supervillains for him. In fact, after a while, what's his name? Steve dreamed up a lot of the supervillains. Yeah.
Excellent. So PV writes in, and he wants to know what your favorite movie or animation version of your characters has been. There's been a lot of them over
Best
the years.
adaptation.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not really good at favorites because I like so many things, but certainly I think Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man, has to be on top of the list. I thought that was just... I think everybody was surprised at how good that Spider-Man movie was, you know?
It was really good.
Including me.
Well, more recently, I mean, I assume you've seen Iron Man. Were you happy?
Iron Man was wonderful.
Yeah.
Even if they did cut my dialogue line out.
Oh, did they?
Best cameo yet?
Yeah, I had
Come on.
I had a line of. I'll tell you what it was. See, I'll give you.
Yeah, now's your chance to
do a little read.
Deliver it.
Yeah.
I'll give you what is it, Fanboy?
iFanboy.
An iFanboy exclusive.
Nice.
I'm standing there with my arms around three beautiful blondes, and I insisted on a lot of retakes. And as you know, Bob comes over to Robert Downey Jr. comes over to me, taps me on the shoulder. I turn around, and he says, "Hi, Hef," and then he looks at me, sees it isn't Hef, and he walks away. Now, originally, when he tapped me on the shoulder and says, "Hi, Hef," I look at him, and he says, "Oh, you're not Hef." And I say, "That's okay. I get that all the time." Now, Jon Favreau, the director, he wrote that line for me. He gave me the line and told me to say it. And he is probably the one who cut it out. Now, it can't be, because I didn't say it right.
No,
he says,
no,
"We all know I'm one of the great actors of our time." So I can't imagine. Anyway, my lawyer is working it out with their lawyers, and it'll be all right.
They need to,
DVD
yes, they need to sell DVDs. They need to put your scene in
there.
there.
Oh,
That's
maybe
what it
that's
is.
it. Oh, I should have figured that out.
Was there?
Oh, I got to tell you another funny thing about that. In order to look like Hugh Hefner. They gave me a pipe to keep in my mouth. Well, the first time, we did 1,000 takes. The first time he taps me on the shoulder, I got the pipe in my mouth. So I turned my head, but this girl was standing very close to me, and the pipe hit her right in the face. So that was when we started doing new takes. Okay,
That's a good blooper.
Just on the movies, was Spider-Man the first one of the movie adaptations where you could look up on a screen and say, this is actually what I pictured it would look like? Because, it's the first time. Like, when I think about the effects needed and, the Fantastic Four, it could never be done before
You really
then.
felt as if Spider-Man was swinging through the city. You believed it.
It was
Whereas that
wonderful,
70s TV show was a little less
But
believable.
I think the first time I felt this is what it should be like. Didn't the X-Men come
Yes.
before
Oh,
that?
yeah.
I think it was when I saw the first X-Men.
Yeah.
I said, "Wow, that's the way it should have been."
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
But
and every time-
Spider-Man, of course, was wonderful.
This really strange thing happens. I wake up in the hotel room, no one is there but me and a note that says, "Hey, Connor, we talked to Jeff. We don't need you today." And they're gone, and the equipment is gone. And that's kind of strange because I thought it was kind of important today. I guess they had something else to do. And that left me nothing else to do but come to the pool, hang out, and tell you about GameOnGames.com. GameOnGames.com is your place to go if you like games. They have computer games, they've got video games, they've got board games, they've got card games. And basically, if it's a game, they've got it and you want it. They've got Atari games, they've got Nintendo games, they've got Super Nintendo games, they've got basically classic stuff and new stuff together. They've got Grand Theft Auto 4, they got stuff. I got a Wii, I love my Wii, they got Wii games, I'm going to look and check for Wii games there. Basically, you want it, they got it. If you like card games, video games isn't your thing, card games, they've got World of Warcraft, the card game, they've got Yu-Gi-Oh!, they got Magic the Gathering, they've got everything. So if you're a gamer, if you're into games of all sorts and shapes and sizes, you should go to GameOnGames.com.
All right, so Gene writes in, and this is about your recent work. He saw the video we did at the New York Comic Con about election days, and he wanted to hear more about it. He said, could you please describe your new politically satirical book, Election Days, and where might we get a copy?
Well, I was going to say you should have given some sort of notice that everyone who asks about the book has to first buy the book. It can be bought at Barnes & Noble is going to have a very big thing about the book in a little while. They're working on that. Anyway, Barnes & Noble has it. And I think that Borders has it. I did a big book signing at Borders in New York, the one on Park Avenue and 57th Street. And certainly you can get it on Amazon if the stores are all sold out, So there's no excuse for anybody not getting Election Days.
You can go to ifanboy.com/store, and you can purchase it there, and we'll have a link to buy the book. So.
And if nobody buys, or if you don't buy enough Election Days, you'll be stuck with me going on these interviews forever, plugging
No one
it.
wants that.
So the only way you can shut me up is buy the book, and that'll quiet me down.
What's it about? I'm not familiar with it.
I thought you'd never ask me. What it is, it's photos of all the people involved in the election and the campaign. It's got Hillary, and it's got Obama, and it's got McCain, I think that's his name. Yeah. And I even threw George Bush in and a lot of other people. I took their, I didn't take it. We got the photos of these great celebrities, and I put my own dialogue balloons above their head. Not what they are saying, but what I thought they should have been saying, or it looked like they were saying to me. And I got to tell you, it's a pretty funny book, Everybody who's seen it loves it.
How to Run Elections the Marvel Way, I guess it was.
That's right, very good. I want this guy sitting closer. Would you change
You're out. Josh, you're gone.
This has been my worst show ever.
And the amazing thing about Election Days, DAZE, is it's only $9.95 for 96 humor-packed pages. I mean, I don't know how I am so generous. And that's about all I can say about it.
So it's been out. Are you happy with the response? You did the signing, or you've seen people on the subway reading it and
Well, I
enjoying
haven't
it?
taken the subway because we don't have one. No, I think we do have one in Los Angeles, but I have no
not as good as
idea
in New
where
York.
it is or where it goes. I've
far.
heard there is one. In New York, I used to know how to travel by subway. Here, it's a total mystery. But at any rate, I have seen one or two people carrying it with big smiles on the happiest looking people you could ever find. It may be a coincidence, but they were carrying my book.
Awesome.
Election Days, $9.95.
So also
Better than ever. He's better than ever at the salesmanship.
So some more work you're working on. Excuse me for butchering the name, but Hashigaki writes in asking about the manga that you're working on with Hiroku Takai. and wants to know, has manga influenced you, and what is the experience of working on a Japanese style comic been, and are you writing it for a Japanese audience, or are you keeping American audiences in mind, and
It's a lot of fun working with that. I love the Japanese people. I love Japan. I've been there a number of times. And manga is so different from American comics in so many different ways. And really what I'm trying to do is take the best of Japanese manga and hopefully the best of American comics and combine them and see what the result will look like.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky because I'm working with a top Japanese artist in a big publishing company, and we're also doing television and animation, everything, and we'll see how it turns out. But so far it's been very exciting, and the thing I like best about it, I'm very busy, so I don't have time to go to Japan, but we have these video conferences, and the Japanese people that are here in I was going to say in New York, in Los Angeles. I still think of myself as 30 years I've lived here. I still think of myself as a New Yorker. But anyway, they bring these nice little laptop sets, and by the magic that only they understand, I have no idea how they do it. The next thing I know, I'm looking at the people in Japan, and we're talking to each other.
Which is
Wow,
stuff that
it's
you put in
wonderful.
comic books in the
right.
60s.
What's that?
Which is stuff that you had put in comic books in the
That's
60s
right,
as made-up
absolutely.
technology.
Okay, you can keep your
Oh,
You're back in.
Oh, that was so validating.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So our next question comes from Ray Clark, who, and I'm not sure how much, whether you go to the comic book store on Wednesdays and read the books that come out, but you might have heard there's a big thing at Marvel going on called Secret Invasion.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So, and it features
the
the
Scrolls.
Yep, your creation.
Wow, I am so proud of I got to tell you something. I made up the name The Scroll. I made up most everything, but I made up the name The Scrolls. Could you think of a better name for evil aliens than Scroll? Oh, I love that name. I love names.
Yep. Well, when you created them, they were kind of bumbling, and now they've kind of, the characters have grown into this kind of
tactical, and they're
evil empire, and they're invading.
Sinister,
So I
Yeah.
mean, so what, how do you think what Bendis is doing with the story, and
I think it's good. See, this is how you become a good guest on a show. When someone asks you a question, I think that was good. Next question.
Okay.
No, it's wonderful. It's a great. I really. Bendis, of course, is a wonderful writer. One of my favorites. And even if he has three names. And I think that all the things they're doing at Marvel now are good. I love that Civil War. I even love the thing that so many people are objecting to, but they'll stop objecting soon, about Spider-Man not being married. You need those things to keep the readers interested and hooked and wondering what'll happen next.
Yeah.
And it's just great. I think that I've got to say this, and maybe he'll take me to lunch sometime if I say it, but I think that Joe Quesada is such a great editor and such a great idea man, as well as a terrific artist and writer. They're very lucky they've got him, and he's willing to take chances and do these things. And I wish I had thought of a lot of these things when I was there, so I'm a little bit annoyed with him. But other than that,
Well, one of the big things that happened recently, in addition to Civil War and the Spider-Man thing, was Captain America getting assassinated, but also Bucky coming back.
oh, I know, but I mean, let us pause for a moment for Captain America. That was a terrible thing, the death of Captain America. And I hope that Bucky can do a good job. It's hell. Those are some footsteps that you have to walk in, and it's not going to be easy for Bucky. I've even read that a lot of people are objecting to Captain America carrying a gun now.
Yes.
With Captain America. Boy, I want to tell you, if I had to fight the villains he had to fight, I'd carry a grenade launcher. I'd have anything you could carry.
All right, so our next question is from our camp, who wants to know, what is the one character or idea from Marvel or maybe from DC that you saw and you're like, gee, I wish I thought of that? Like, has there ever been a character that jumped out that you...
I usually think I wish I thought of that. No matter what I see, I resent other people coming up with other things. But Maybe Wolverine. I somehow never got around to creating Wolverine. He's a great character.
One of my favorites.
Really, everybody's favorite. And I didn't do him, and that really burns me up. I gotta tell you.
Well, the X-Men are my personal favorite characters. They're the ones that got me into reading comics, and they were the ones.
That's good.
Yeah. Did you and it started off as the kind of the teen outcasts and type thing. In the '70s, they took it in that kind of international direction. Was that something that you're like, oh wow, that's a great idea, or did it stray from your original concept?
No, the international thing. I probably would have eventually gotten there too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was just a little slower. I kind of plodded along. You know how it is.
So I'm still here at the pool. No phone calls, no nothing. Don't know where the guys are. They must be doing something really important because here I sit. So since I'm still here, I'll tell you about graphicaudio.net. They've got unique audio experiences. It's not just like a book on tape. They've got full cast recordings. They've got music. They've got sound effects. It's not just some dude reading you a book you could be reading yourself. It's like an audio experience. It's like a whole big play of audio going on. And they've got over 300 sci-fi and adventure tales. They've got the newest releases, JLA Exterminators. They did things like Infinite Crisis in 52. If you're into that kind of stuff, you want to get a full cast recording of it, graphicaudio.net is the place to go. They got stuff in CDs. They got it in MP3s. They got WMAs. They got all the formats you need. And if you put in coupon code iFanboy, you get 40% off your first purchase. So go to graphicaudio.net. Since you're already on the internet, you should go to GoDaddy.com to get domain names. They got 24/7 support. They got 99.9% uptime. They got domains starting as low as $1.99. I mean, you don't get much lower than that these days. So if you go to GoDaddy.com for all your domain name needs, you use coupon code iFanboy and you get 10% off everything you buy. That's a great deal.
All right, cool. So our next question comes from Ian, who writes in saying he's seen interviews where you've jokingly talked about the competition between yourself and Bob Kane and DC in the Distinguished Competition. He's curious about whether, was there an actual rivalry that went on between you and him, as well as actual rivalries between Marvel and DC?
Tell me, when you mention these guys who wrote these questions,
Yeah.
you say from Ian.
Yeah.
Isn't Ian annoyed that you don't give his last name and a little more credit to
It's
him?
the internet, Stan.
Here's your chance to make him a celebrity. I mean,
He
there's
can put his last
millions of
name.
people.
Yeah, he can. We allow them to put their last name. They choose.
But
the-
they only put their first. They're embarrassed by their question.
Yeah.
Ian, you should have done it. This was your chance for your 15 minutes of fame.
But now every Ian that watches the show can say it was me he was talking about.
Oh, that's pretty clever. All right, switch seats.
I'm back, baby.
Who do the rankings,
I don't
Jeff,
like you.
Josh?
But to get back to your question,
Yeah.
because we mustn't stray.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bob Kane was a very funny guy, and we were quite friendly. In fact, I thought I was friendly with just about everybody in the comic book business. I had a lot of friends at DC. The editor was my friend, Carmen Infantino. At the time, he was the editor. And the president of DC now, Paul Levitz, is a very close friend, and he's a wonderful guy, as was Carmine. At any rate, Bob Kane, there's so many funny things about him. Like, my wife and I used to have dinner with his wife and him. Very often we'd go out to dinner. The man could never, either of them could never be on time for anything. So if we had a dinner date for 7 o'clock, they'd get there at 7:15. We'd be sitting for 15 minutes waiting. So Joan and I would say, okay, we'll keep them waiting next time. So the next dinner date, if it was 7 o'clock, we got there at 7:20. Didn't help. They got there at 7:30. And it finally reached the point where we were coming to places like 2 hours late, and they still would beat us. Finally, they won the ultimate triumph. We had a date, and Joan and I came very late, and they didn't show up at all. And we forgot. So he always won in that case. Another thing about him, Bob was the exact opposite of me in one way. I really, when I'm out, I don't make a fuss about comics and the fact that I did them. And, that's something you talk about in the office, not when you're outside. But Bob, we'd go to the restaurant if we had lunch together, and we're sitting down. A waiter came over to, hey, do you know who I am? I'm Bob Kane. I do Batman. Let me show you. He'd get a napkin, and he'd draw a picture of Batman, and he'd give it to the waiter. And I'm like this, But he, bless him, he loved what he did, and he was proud of it, and I don't blame him. And the only other thing about Bob, and it's a shame that he didn't hang around long enough to see what happened to these movies, but he was still here when the first Batman movie came out, and he used to tease me about it. Hey, Batman's a movie. What about Spider-Man? Those little comic books. And I hope you're watching. We outsold you.
And you're him.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, speaking of in 'em, Larry Cohen, a friend of mine, is a writer-director. And he did a lot of movies that you probably haven't heard. There was one called Q, kind of a monster movie years ago about some sort of a dragon that lived in the Chrysler Building. And it doesn't matter. But for a time, he was very. He's a clever guy, and he's done a million movies. At any rate, he told me once, he's a friend of Bob Kane's, and he said, I wanted Bob to be an extra, a cameo in one of... No, he didn't. Bob said, can I be in one of your movies? So he said, all right, I've got a party scene. You be one of the members of the party. You be in the back. And whatever you do, don't look at the camera. Just talk to people. So he said, all right, I got behind the camera to see what the scene looked like. And everybody is talking, and I see one head like that. And I said, cut, Bob. Just kind of mingle. Don't look at the cat. He said this went on and on, no matter what. Everybody was just talking, but there was one head like that. So he never told me what happened. I don't know whether he kicked Bob out or used it anyway. But I can picture Bob being that way. I really liked him though, because it was fun being with him. He talked a lot and he was enthusiastic, and he was a good guy.
Yeah. So when you guys were making the comics, would you go pick up the DC books and see what they were doing in Batman? Stuff
Very
like that?
rarely.
Yeah.
Not that I had any reason. It's not a put down for the DC books. I didn't have time to read the competition.
Frantically publishing, right? You're getting book after book written,
yeah.
right?
And I felt it really didn't make any difference, because I didn't want to do what they were doing, and maybe I didn't even want to be influenced by what they were doing, but mainly, really, I just didn't have the time, Yeah. So I just stayed home and did our own stuff, and I would find out later how their books sold. And one other thing, do you have a minute?
No.
This was very funny. There was a time when we started outselling them. And I learned this from people who worked at DC, but we were all friends, so they would tell me these things later. They would have conferences, how come Marvel is outselling DC? Well, one guy would pop up, I think it's because they have a lot of dialogue balloons on the cover. So the minute I heard that, I said to the guys, we're not going to have any dialogue balloons for the next month. Must have driven them crazy. Then they come up with something like, well, Stan uses a lot of red on the covers. I called the colorist, no red for the next 2 months. That was a little game we played.
That's great.
All right, well, our last question.
That's all?
Well, we'll see where
All
we
right.
go. Comes from Face, another anonymous person, about the character of the Sentry.
Half anonymous, because you mentioned one name.
Yeah, Face. The character of the Sentry, which is a fairly new character in Marvel.
Who? The Sentry?
The Sentry. The yellow costume. Okay, well then this question really doesn't really matter.
No, I'm
not a lot.
By the way,
Very good. Yes. Yes.
I don't even have time to read the Marvel books, except if my assistant Mike says, hey, Stan, there's something here you ought to see. They changed something. I'm going to give him hell if there's a new character and he didn't show me.
Well, he's been around for a few years, and he's come back.
has.
He's come back recently, and he's kind of like a Superman-esque character. He's a yellow costume with a blue cape, and very complicated in the Marvel kind of way. He's schizophrenic. I think that's one of his kind of thing.
I can relate to that.
Our fans and we personally don't like him at all.
Oh, really?
So how much do fan reception and reaction affect when you guys were creating the books? If somebody you created a character and you would get tons of letters saying he's awful, because I was reading the Fantastic Four omnibus and I love those letter pages. And you had Roy Thomas and Dave Cockrum writing in, and fans would say, I hate Johnny Storm. He's too impulsive and whatever. How much of fan comments would affect the way you guys would do the comics?
Well, I mentioned that I didn't read the competitive books, but I read every fan letter I could get my hands on. And I cared very much what the fans said, but there's an interesting dichotomy there. The more the fan would say, I hate this character, the more I would figure this character is making a hell of an impression. Any character that arouses that much feeling on the part of the fan, you got to give that character a little more time and stay with it, you know? It's the characters that they don't write about that are not having any effect at all. And I tried to gauge myself. Again, as I told you at the beginning, I was my own best judge, I think. If I liked the character or found maybe I didn't like the character, but I thought the character was interesting, I would keep it and work with it. Now, I don't know what the Sentry is, but if people hate the Sentry enough to send you 1,000 letters, it might be worth keeping him around for a while.
Oh,
Let's see what happens.
did it surprise you, like after the FF started and Spider-Man, to see letters sent in with such passion? I mean, even if it's I hate this, but
And you printed the hate letters, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah.
It was like there were people, I mean, reading, and those omnibuses are great. And if you haven't picked them up, pick them up because they have the full. It's like reading the full issue. And people would say, "I hate Sue Storm. She's a wet
Paragraphs.
nurse." Paragraphs. And most people wouldn't print negative comments. I thought that was really interesting.
Oh, I thought the negative ones were the most interesting, and also they would give me a chance to put my little reply in
Yes.
and totally destroy the letter.
And another controversial one was you mentioned earlier, the Spider-Man One More Day, which you're familiar with. So, I mean, it was, you say you have to make these changes in the comics and all that kind of thing, but that was one thing again that the fans reacted very negatively to. That people liked the fact that he was married to Mary Jane, and
All I can say to that. And it may not be a good idea. And, maybe the fans truly hate it. Yeah. But you see, the only way you can tell is by the sales. If the sales start slipping, it's not a good idea. But if the sales remain the same or go up and the fans are complaining, then, well, what the hell?
Something's working.
And I was about to say something very profound. Oh, yeah, I remember. I remember when I said, let's marry Spider-Man and Mary Jane. You don't know how much hate mail we got. How can you marry her? He shouldn't get married. He's just a kid and he ought to be single and everything you can
And Joe
think
Quesada wrote a lot of those letters.
It's very funny. Sit where you are.
and Josh is back on top.
2-1. So you don't know. They hated it, but now they're upset that he's divorced.
Yeah.
And I personally think it's a clever idea. And the beautiful thing about comics, or being a comic book editor, you're like a god. You can change anything. I mean, if after a year or 2 or 10 years or 100 years they decide it's not a good idea for him not to be married, they marry him. If they decide it's a good idea for somebody to die, they kill him. If they decide they're sorry they died him, they bring him back. I mean, you can do anything. It's I got power mad for a while when I was drunk with power.
That's such a misconception today. I think that a lot of people think that with the internet there's so much more feedback, but it seems like you had so much feedback even then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the internet, I wish that I could roll back the years and we had the internet then, because to me, the feedback is the most exciting thing in any position, whether you're in the movie business or television or comics. If you can hear from your audience,
That's what we love,
wonderful.
doing these kinds of shows.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. That's not something to complain about, but it's beautiful. It's a shame you don't have any viewers, but
we're working on it, though. We're working on it.
That's why you're here.
There was a comedian, I think it was Lenny Bruce, who at the end of his act he would occasionally say, "Is there anyone else that I haven't defended?" I almost feel like saying that now.
Excellent. Well, that's the rest of our user questions. I don't know if you guys had any other questions you wanted to ask. Or
I hope
curious
not,
about?
because I think I'm late for a lunch date.
See, you're a busy man, right?
I think the viewers covered it pretty well.
Yes.
I think they
indeed.
did, yeah. So,
Yeah, well, I tell you, I enjoyed it. Of course, I'm easy to please, but really, I had a good time.
Excellent.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your time, Stan. So, if you have any comments about this episode, you can head over to ifanboy.com or revision3.com/ifanboy and leave your comments. There'll be a thread about the post.
And don't forget, it's called Election Days.
It's
If the
$9.95.
bookstores are sold out, you can get it at Amazon. 96 big pages for a lousy $9.95. I mean, we're practically giving it away. You won't stop laughing. Oh, this made it
So much
all
energy.
worthwhile.
I know
He's a
it's
force of
I
nature.
know,
Love
it's
it.
amazing. So excellent. Well, thank you again, and we appreciate your time. So
Love being here.
yeah, excellent.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Next time I want 2 on that side and 2 there. We
Well, we're
weren't
trying to get
balanced.
some women going. I mean,
That would be
that's
better.
the next thing, really.
Oh, I forgot one thing. Excelsior! Are we checking the white balance?
Wow, somebody's done this before, I think.
Old pro, huh?
And is this man bonded?
As far as we're concerned, yes.
We're rolling. We're good. All right, we're good to see.
Everybody all ready?
Already.
All right, cool.
This glass of water isn't in my way, is it? It's not covering up any feature.
Huge shadow.